So we may have had a hotel that had a contract for 100 out of 200 rooms with Electric Boat or you name the company, and they never showed up because they didn't have the budget approval to do the work and come out here. And so here you are where you're expecting 80, 75, 80% occupancy, certain revenue, and all of a sudden that goes away overnight. Yet you still have a mortgage to pay, you still have a utility bill to pay, insurance premiums, and all those things, and you're firefighting at that point.
Good
Yo,
day. Good day.
yes,
How's it
sir.
going?
Another day, man. Just doing what I do, grinding.
Your hair
How about
looks
you?
your hair looks fantastic. I just realized that, this is probably year 10 of you winning best hair in the region. So
Well, yeah,
we got to make that announcement at least once a year, let the world know.
puts a lot of pressure on me, Zach. It really does.
Well, don't screw it up.
I know that's the pressure. It's just yeah.
You've had like consistently the same hair forever since I've met you.
Probably from the time that probably since basic training, from the time that they like after they shaved your head when you go through basic and it just grew out. It probably has been the same ever since then. So just
Just
when
one
you
of those
got
things you
something,
don't
just roll with it.
got it. So you don't want to.
I
Okay.
always, but I always respect that. Like when you look at like Brad Pitt or someone like that who's had like very very different styles, short to long. Yeah, I mean, it's just like man, I don't
But is it
respect.
real hair or is it like plugins or whatever they call it?
Well,
I'm
I
not
don't
saying that his
know.
hair isn't real. I'm
Yeah,
saying
yeah,
like,
yeah. I don't know. I
do they
mean,
put a
like
wig on him?
you know me, man. I'm just like I am Mr. Consistency. I always have been, and I probably always will be. That's just who I am as a person.
Yeah, just don't think about it. Roll with it. Today's guest
Yeah.
also has fantastic hair. I don't know if
I'm losing
he's.
it.
No, you're not.
Well,
It
that's
looks
that's part of
fantastic.
the pressure, right? I mean, it's just like if we all are getting older. We're not getting any younger. So like, it's just my hair is not as thick as when I was probably in my 20s, and so that's where the pressure comes in.
I remember I asked um, Chris Lane, who shaves his head, at one point, like, what? How'd you make that decision? And then Eric Olson, who I think both of you might know.
Yeah.
He's like, I go up to people sometimes, they have like the unicorn, like the short stubs, and he's just like, yo, it's time. You just got to take it off. And so it's like, I guess there's a line, unless you're a professor at a college, you probably just let it go.
Yeah. I would
Every
think
time
that
I go
it's,
get a haircut,
Rogan will talk about it from time to time. I mean, I'm not like a hardcore Rogan listener, but I do enjoy him and I enjoy his insight. But he was like, dude, it's just life is so much easier. Just get rid of it and take a washcloth, and life is easy. I still don't want to go down that road just
mm-mm.
yet.
Yeah, when I start seeing grays, I get terrified. So it's
Oh, dude, that was like a one of
I've been
those
seeing gray
questions.
since my 30s.
I asked my wife, I was like, gosh, have I ever come up missing? And you had to describe me to the police, what color hair would you say that I have? And
ooh,
I think that I
what
have
was that
turned
say?
that corner to the gray side. Yeah.
I don't know why this came up. I apologize to the listeners who are like, what are these clowns talking
Every
about
show
there?
starts
But it's
different.
important. Yes,
Yeah.
yes. I met today's guest maybe a decade ago at CrossFit 757, which was, I think, did Ian Taylor, was he a part?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so Ian was in there. Were we doing like the 5:30 in the morning, 6:30 in the morning? Like it was the early. Yeah, okay.
5:30 a.m. Yep, zero
Yes.
dark 30 as we called it.
Where's that located?
At the time, it was right by 21st Street.
Yeah, it was right by S. Ray Barrett. Yep.
Yeah, but now it's
I think
probably
they're
so.
done.
Before it was about. Oh, they closed.
They closed. Yeah, they moved to Hampton Boulevard, and then they moved closer to the base. But then I think that last I heard, they closed down recently.
Huh.
All right. Well, R.I.P. to them. It was fun. It was good times. Met Tejal there. Andy Hook, who created Hooklaw. There, Andy had started this thing called Andy Fit. So, like, Andy, this is so funny. This little guy, he would if one of the funniest people you'll ever meet. He really is. He's like, I'm gonna start this thing called Andy Fit, And so it was like CrossFit for seniors, I think is kind of what he was calling it. And so like they would do every day, there would be a whiteboard workout of the day. And this guy would do a like an alternative, and he'd call it Handy Fit version.
Yeah. He got us all T-shirts too, I think.
He did? I never saw one of those.
Yeah, you must have missed that 5:30 class, but it was definitely a great class because we met a lot of good people. It was certainly, you know, a driven group of just smart people from all walks of life. It was really good.
Yeah, I always try to tell people like, hey, like I know you're going to a business networking event, and it seems like that's probably where you're going to find all your business, you know, allegedly. But you know, find a hobby or find something else. You might find better people out there that would that you can have a real connection with immediately and go from there. And so, you know, my whole thing, I always tell people, you know, stop asking people business questions the first time you meet them. Ask them what they're watching on Netflix, because likely they are watching Netflix or streaming some sort of content. And so you and I have, you know, very, very rarely talked about business, but here you are today. You know, got a lot of respect for you and everything that you've done. And
well, we've talked about this before, Zach, and it's probably been several episodes, but it's amazing to me, like the caliber of people that busy people higher on the food chain, the go-getters within the organization. Yeah, like they make time to take care of themselves. And if you want something done, ask a busy person to do it, but they always make time for it. And it's just, so those types of CrossFit events or Andy Fit or whatever, you know, there's a lot of people that, it's pretty impressive to see like the number of C-level people that do triathlons and marathons and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So when I met you, where were you working? 10 years ago, where were you working?
I was at LTD Hospitality Group, a family business my dad started in 1983.
That's the hotels?
Yeah.
Okay. What was that world like?
It was interesting. You know, I grew up kind of in the family business and didn't quite have any pressure to come back, but it was like, you know, this business had provided so much for our family. I saw it from scratch basically to where it had become, which was, you know, a nationally recognized development and operating company. And so there was a sense of pride. And so, you know, coming back into the family business was exciting. I think when I got there, I definitely had an image in mind of what the business was like versus what I actually saw when I got there. And it's nothing bad, but it wasn't lined up with my expectation. And it, you know, true to form, showed that family businesses are interesting. They're very interesting. There's a lot of dynamics, a lot of layers, a lot of emotions and challenges that are unique to family businesses. So I joined in '07. Of course, I grew up in the business, so to speak, but after coming back from grad school, I joined in '07. At the time, the commercial real estate market was at the top of, you know, the market. And shortly thereafter in '08, everything crashed. And so I joined at the peak of our family business. We had grown over 50% in 2 years, expanded from one state to 3 states, roughly 500 employees to over 2,000 employees. And you kind of had this dynamic of kind of the old guard and new guard, and the newer guard, you know, the old guard being my dad and his partner who founded it, the new guard, my brother and kind of the other partner's son who were been there about 10 years before I got there. And then myself and then the younger sibling from the other family. We joined about 10 years later. So it was just, there was a lot there, a lot of great lessons learned, Did
you go to grad school right after undergrad, or did you take some time in between the two?
I took some time. I took a year, and I worked in DC at the Public Defender Service to see if I really wanted to go to law school. And you know, my dad is the one who kind of pushed me to go into law school just because of the amount of real estate transactions we were doing and, you know, all the issues surrounding that. He certainly said, you know, pursue your MBA. I never, ever, ever wanted to work at a law firm or practice. but I'm glad I did go to law school. It taught me how to think differently. It got me out of my comfort zone. And I think it's paid dividends to date. So I'm happy about that.
Yeah, I guess the reason that I ask is talking to our daughter this weekend. She's getting ready to graduate from JMU, and so one of her classmates, they have a family-owned business, and the parents were very clear, like, you graduate, you cannot come back to the family business. You have to go out and experience some other job for a certain amount of time and experience that to determine where you want to go before you come back into the business. And I thought that was pretty insightful.
I would echo their sentiments. I would do that. And in fact, my brother, I think probably had butted heads with my dad. My dad wanted me more to come straight back to the business. My brother said now he needs to go out and explore, what other businesses are doing. And, at the time I just, I didn't quite understand it. I thought maybe he was pushing me away, but I don't think that's what was happening. And I ended up coming back straight to the family business. I do wish I'd gone out.
Where'd you go? What school was that?
So undergrad, University of Virginia, and then I took a year off and did the DC Public Defender Service for a little while and traveled, and then I went to Penn State and did my JD and my MBA there.
Penn State, okay.
Nice.
You guys got
pedigree.
2 good football players this year.
Yeah. We've we just can't make it to the big stage and get it done, but we're getting closer every year.
When they announced the playoffs, I was like, this is going to be really good for Penn State, who usually loses like 1 or 2 games, Michigan, Ohio State, but they'll still make the playoffs. And that's exactly what happened.
It is.
A lot of people where I grew up in Northern Virginia went to Penn State right afterwards.
Yeah.
Which huge stadium. Pretty cool.
Yeah.
Okay. So you're at the hotel business, 500 to 2,000 people. That seems like a dramatic shift. Was that just because of opening or the acquisition of new locations, or how does that expansion work?
Yeah, absolutely. We were undergoing a building boom. I mean, we were building assets in Maryland, in Illinois, and North Carolina, and we had to employ those people to open those assets and operate them. So, yeah, it was a function of just growth, and at the same time, we were exploring capital markets and exiting from our portfolio, cashing out. But I think, again, in a sense, the tail was wagging the dog in that there was a little bit of cold feet about exiting, because it's like, what do? We got these second generation in their 30s and 40s who just joined the business and we're getting ready to sell it. What are they going to do? And that kind of stalled, I think, the process. And there was certainly an internal struggle about, do we sell, don't we sell? And ultimately, the decision was made not to sell. And unfortunately, that's when the bottom fell out in 2008. So I think we had opened 12 hotels between 2006 and 2007. They were new construction loans, so personally guaranteed by the family members. Mm-hmm. And overnight, the revenue fell apart, dropped. Like there was no revenue coming in because the market had tanked, and the bank still wanted to be paid. And that's when the legal degree certainly kicked in. I wasn't on the front lines necessarily fighting or negotiating, but I was certainly in-house counsel. I was kind of keeping my business guys focused on the business, and I was managing the attorneys and kind of negotiating or being the mouthpiece for our negotiations with all the lenders.
I'm trying to think back to that time. Did people just stop traveling? Is that where?
Yeah. So, typically in a recession, discretionary travel goes away, right? People stop taking vacation. The opposite happened in COVID, which was crazy. But this recession was so deep that corporate travelers who we catered to, their budgets got slashed and they were not spending any travel. And then the federal government in, I don't know, was it 11 or 13? I can't remember, went through sequestration. And it was like we were just getting out of the Great Recession, and then the federal government decided to, sequester military spending. And a lot of our clients at the time were, General Dynamics, Electric Boat, all the ancillary businesses that do the work for the federal government that travel to Hampton Roads and other markets where we were. Their budgets were on hold because Congress, kept punting or didn't approve the budget, and so they couldn't spend. So we may have had a hotel that had a contract for 100 out of 200 rooms with Electric Boat, or you name the company, and they never showed up because they didn't have the budget approval to do the work and come out here. And so here you are where you're expecting 80, 75, 80% occupancy, and certain revenue, and all of a sudden that goes away overnight. Yet you still have a mortgage to pay, you still have a utility bill to pay, insurance premiums, and all those things, and you're firefighting at that point.
Are people worried about that aspect right now in the world?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think the hospitality industry is highly cyclical, and the reason why a lot of people don't get into it is it's tough. I mean, it's an operating business. It's not just real estate. It's an operating business. Labor is always a challenge. And in the hotel space, your lease lasts one day. Whereas, multifamily, you got maybe a year-long lease, or an office space, you got 5-7 year long leases. You got a day. And so the advantage to that is if the market adjusts and there's a boom, you can reset your rates every day. But if there's a fall, you don't have the luxury of that long-term lease there to secure your revenue stream. So it's highly cyclical. You've got to understand leverage in capital markets. You got to understand operations. If your operations are not tight, your margins are going to get blown, even in a good economic period. So it's a very complicated business. There's certainly, money to be made, that's for sure. But a lot of it is exogenous external factors that can come in and wreck your business model, which happened to me a second time. And we can talk about that later.
So I don't even know if this is the right question. How long is a typical mortgage for new construction of a hotel?
Yeah, typically you get a 3-year kind of construction loan, and then tack on another 2-year kind of term to get it stabilized. And then once you get it stabilized, you can get long-term financing, you can do short-term financing. There's a whole gamut of options out there.
Interesting.
But yeah. And at the time, everybody and their mother was lending to the hotel world, and that was part of the problem. Is banks were getting into deals that they probably shouldn't have been in, and so when the market tanked, their loans started to go bad, and they didn't have the reserves to cover these bad loans, and so the banks were cratering themselves.
So this is about a decade ago. You're in the family business. There's writing on the wall that it's getting bad. How do you? I think you're starting a family at that point too. Like, how do you roll out of that and decide you're going to do something else? How do you decide that, okay, it's time, I need to throw in the towel? Like, how does that decision happen? Because I think a lot of our audience is early stage founders who have to push through, or maybe throw in the towel, and it's hard to understand maybe when to do that. Was there, did you have a pros and cons list? Did you, how do you look at that, now a decade later?
That's a great question. Looking back, it's a little bit of naivete and a little bit of gumption in a way. Looking back, I don't know that I considered everything, but what I did think through really hard was, am I happy? And I think that we get caught up so much in the doing and not enough in stop and pause and really answer the question, what do I want? And that's such a critical question that I see not being answered by so many people. Like, what do I want deeply? What do I really want? And I think after several years of pondering on that, I decided that, as hard as it is, because I love my family, I love my dad, my brother, and even the partners and their family members. We grew up together. It was hard to come to the conclusion that, like, everything you grew up thinking you were going to do is not what's going to make you happy, and not what's best for you in the long term. And so the best thing for me is to be happy, so I'm a better brother, son, husband. And so I need to figure it out. And so I, I don't know, Zach. I think that most young founders, they're grinders, and I just felt like I'm a grinder. I'll figure it out. I won't be. Um, of course, I didn't do it all on my own. I had a lot of help from friends and family. I had a lot of help from my network. But I think that grinder mentality will help you figure it out, right? It's just figuring out that, what do you want first, and that's how I kind of came to that decision.
I think that another thing that I've come to realize is that when you're in it and you're grinding through it, you don't stop thinking about it, but no one else thinks about you or your business nearly as much as you do. And I think that helps the process. They're like, oh man, every time I run into somebody, they're going to look at me and judge me or think this way or think that way. When the reality is that everyone's busy in their own mess, so to speak, that they're not going to really think twice about you, your business, or the decision that you made.
Tim, that's a great point. That's an absolutely great point. And I think as I reflect on it, I've always been somebody who, initially, yeah, I care about what other people think, but then I don't. I just do what I want to do. And I think I wish if more people did that and had the courage, because most people aren't really thinking about you. You're not that important. Everybody has their own issues they're dealing with. But if you have the courage to just pop out or step out and do something, it could lead to so many other opportunities. So that's a great point. I think you're exactly right.
Yeah, and it's just like, I guess even take that one step further. Like, I've written some checks into some early companies as an angel investor, and even from that regard, like companies that have gone to zero, I don't hold it against those founders, and we're still, we still chat and communicate. And chances are, if they started something new, I would probably, invest in them again, because they've learned, and they're not going to make the same mistakes twice. So I don't even hold it against them in that regard, either from a personal level. It's just life.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
interesting. I remember too, Tim, just to piggyback off of that. Like, I remember as the person who was investing in, when we did Hatch 2, which basically flopped. We invested in 4 or 5 companies, and we didn't lose that much money for, in the grand scheme of things. But I remember as I was telling the investors of the fund, like, hey, like, you're only getting like 5% of your money back that you gave me.
Yeah.
It was very emotional for me, because I felt like a failure in that. But all of them, like, were like cool with it. And I'm just like,
yeah.
Really? Like,
now I need to make sure I caveat that, in the sense of, like, these founders that I still have relationship, they were grinding until the very end. We saw the monthly updates, and we saw them cutting costs and letting people go and just doing whatever they could. Now, I mean, if they fraudulently were like, they're just chilling and playing PlayStation or whatever, and that's a totally different thing. But these founders, they were grinding until the very end.
What if they were playing on their MCon though?
Yeah, right. I don't have a stake in MCon. I mean, good for MCon, but I don't have a stake.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that's exactly right. Like, the sponsor that you're investing in, they may have the most brilliant idea, and they may be the hardest worker, but there's certain factors that just come in and are out of their control. And I think that's when you start to realize who your friends are and who aren't friends, and who are smart, savvy investors and who aren't. Smart, savvy ones get it, the ones who kind of hang on, and rightly so, to every dollar, they're going to find every reason to blame you. It's your fault.
Yeah.
Do you just said friends? I think that's interesting. Do you ever like look through your network and kind of weed people out, like during your reflection of stuff? You're like, you know what, that's not working for me. I think I need to like remove that person from my life, or slim it down. Do you ever like do stuff like that?
Absolutely. I mean, I think for me, I started to do that in my 30s when I was having a family and building it and then focusing on kind of forging my path. I think it's absolutely critical you get rid of dead weight and, what I call, takers. They're constantly taking from you and not giving, or, that concept of filling your bucket, because you just don't have time to waste on that kind of stuff. So yeah.
Yeah, I was listening to a podcast yesterday, and they were talking about small business owners, and they had this policy in place that if they had to talk about an employee 3 times, it was a husband and wife that owned the business. If they had to talk about an employee 3 times before they went to bed, they're gone. They fired them immediately
In a negative way.
Yeah. And I was like, man, that's pretty hardcore. But at the same time, I mean, like cutting dead weight, and it's you have to hire slow and fire fast. But firing fast, it can be difficult
hard
at times. But
I think it's interesting. It's like, okay, like why are you keeping that person? Is it the emotional aspect of it? I know like when I used to have a handful of teammates, there was an emotional standpoint in there where I'm like, okay, like, am I doing this? Like, why am I doing this? And then I'd keep them on longer than necessary. And then I, let them go. And it was just like, cool, fine. And I'm like, oh, wow, I thought there was going to be a little bit more pushback of this.
And the crazy thing is, man, is that you're almost doing them a favor because their heart's not in it to begin with, but they don't have the courage to walk away. I mean, it just, it's
hard to be the bad guy. Yeah, it's hard to be the bad guy, but I think you got to figure out what the North Star is, and certainly for me, it's always been the firm. The firm, whatever firm, it's the business. Without the business, we're not going to exist. So
how did you navigate that from a family-owned business? Did you have guidelines put in place that what happens in the office stays in the office, and how did you navigate?
You don't bring that up at the birthday party.
Right.
That was really difficult. I mean, it was difficult, but there was a kind of what happens in the locker room stays in the locker room type of thing. But it is hard. I mean, because your personal life and your professional life really bleed together, and sometimes you may have had a heated discussion on a Friday afternoon, and that Friday night you're getting together with a group of people for dinner, and you gotta let that stuff go, but it's not easy.
Yeah.
So how did I navigate it? Sometimes it was picking and choosing where I'm going to be and when, and not make sure I kind of have that separation, but it wasn't easy. That's for sure.
Yeah. It's, and I think that's having something in place from when you hire somebody that is not part of the family, that is in the business, that can be challenging for the outsider, so to speak, as well, just in terms of, is there upward mobility within the organization, or are you going to give it to the family member first because it's family business? I don't know.
There was a lot of that, a lot of resentment. And I understand why, and those are all the interesting dynamics you got to definitely figure out and how to deal with. And that's why, what I think happens is so many entrepreneurs get caught up in building their business, and they get caught up in being in the business as opposed to working on the business. And part of working on the business is, pausing and thinking through these things, nepotism, entitlement just because you're a family member, or is there going to be a system of meritocracy, or what are the governance rules for this family business? What are things that are completely off limits? Who's the final decision maker? Because family members can go back and forth forever, and until there's but how does the old guard transition power to the new guard, and which of the new guard? And there's just so many issues there.
Yeah. Zach, what's your take, man? I got so it's interesting. Like there's an arc in terms of when you're at the beginning of your career, you say yes, 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 and then you peak out, and then like the back half of your career, then you just start saying no, 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 no.
No to
With
what?
just
Y-
opportunities.
Yeah.
We need you to go and do this. Let's meet for this. Let's be a board member for this, that, the other thing.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. So interesting. I don't remember how this, I feel like it was advice someone gave me, but they were like, and this is like 2012, 2013. So was that 12, 13 years ago? They're like, learn how to say no. And I was like, oh, that's really interesting. And so I was very early into, my career, if you will, at that point. But I was taking every single meeting. I was doing every happy hour, late night, every event, every early mornings, late night, like. And at some point, I guess I just was like, I don't want to do. It's not that I don't want to do this, but it's just like this is not healthy. This is not smart. This is whatever. And so, kind of from that point, actually, maybe it's because I read this book by Derek Sivers where he's like, it's either hell yeah or a F no. If you're not like super into it, you just say no. And I was like, oh, that's really interesting. And I, like now I'm just like, I don't want to do that. Occasionally, I'll do something that I don't want to do. Right? Like take a meeting because it was an introduction from someone that, I respect, but I try to live like that. Right. And it's like, okay, like raise your hand when necessary. Right. Like when I had the TV show, it's like, they weren't asking me to be the host. I saw an opportunity and raised my hand.
Right.
Right. And so I think being strategic in that is really important. A lot of people think they're really busy, but they're not being productive whatsoever. And I think that's a really bad way to live your career, and to really kind of take an inventory on a pretty regular basis to be like, what is actually pairing me with what I want, with where I'm spending my time? And I think more people, if they were to act like that, they would see a more productive use of their time. They'd see they'd see the results they want. But they're sitting there like, oh, well, I'm going to have all these meetings. Also, your hour-long meeting could probably be 10 minutes.
Yeah,
and that meeting could be an email, like do it in an email.
Email, yeah. I think you're going back to kind of what I was saying is like figure out what you want first. And I think you just figure it out over time. Sometimes you got to try things and it's like, I don't,
Absolutely.
But once you figure out what you want, then you choose the meetings you want to go to. You choose the events you want to be involved in. So it's like, aim first before you shoot.
Yeah. Well, I think that it's interesting in terms of like, as I process this, how attorneys, how you bill your time. Is it 7, 8 minute, 15-minute increments, whereas a lot of people that are non-law related, they're measure it in either probably 60-minute increments, where it's like, you need to measure it in much smaller increments so that you can get the most out of your time.
Oh God, you're opening up a can of worms here. Again, this is the first law firm I've worked at, and I've always, as I was sitting through the pandemic and twiddling my thumbs on kind of what's my next opportunity going to be, and I got to get out of hospitality and hotels. Professional services was certainly something that was on my mind, and I think what's interesting in the law firm world is it is so ripe for innovation, and I'm not just talking about AI and all that kind of stuff. I'm talking about.
I do want to talk about AI at some point.
Absolutely, but really just basic business processes and systems, and there's just a tremendous opportunity in the law firm space to bring those businesses to today's levels. And I will say Hooklaw has been, and this is why I've invested in it and bought in and committed to it. They've been ahead of the curve of a lot of firms. I walked into the office of I'd say mid to small tier firm that is well known around here just to tour their space. And I felt like I walked into the late 90s or early 2000s. There are Redwells with papers everywhere. They've got a file room almost the size of this floor full of paper files. And it's the things like that that are low hanging fruit. So we can go in a lot of different directions, but I find the legal practice to be the next frontier for consolidations and roll-ups. And there's a whole podcast we could probably just do on that. But I'm happy to talk through any of
that. One question I have, I guess, if you had a child that was getting ready to graduate from high school or graduate from their undergrad right now, would you support them going to law school? Knowing that AI is just there, it is just taken over.
Yes, I would. And here's why. The documents and all that certainly is going to be helped with the onset of AI. It's going to help with processing documents, drafting documents, and all those things. Where I think the lawyer really comes in is dealing with the emotional side and the, parsing the problem that the client is facing. And that is going to be hard, I think, for AI to analyze. And the client still needs handholding. They still need to understand what is happening, what's the process, what's the path forward. There still will have to be negotiations that need to be had, and AI will certainly support that by drafting a document that supports your position or whatever it may be. But I think the human element is hard to take out of it. So what I find that law schools have done very poorly is teach the business of law and teach the soft skills. That's what it has done. It has not done any favors to the legal profession. It's certainly been very academic. It's been, very kind of, this is how we play in this kind of setting. But most lawyers are bad business people.
Which is hilarious to me, because I think we've talked about this before, Tejal, but from some of my other law firm clients, it depends on the firm, but 95% of their business is referrals from other lawyers, but they never go and actually hang out with other lawyers whatsoever. Mm-hmm. The soft skills of just communicating with people on a normal basis, like the three of us do. Going to the CrossFit and talking to the people. They don't have conversations. I'm not saying all of them, but it's like they don't look at that and be like, oh, that could turn into something. And it's so crazy to me because so much of the business is word of mouth and referrals, and that's where they lack.
You're absolutely right. So there's very few Andy Hooks out there who are going to be that guy who cracks jokes and makes those connections. So I'm very fortunate to have him. But part of it is this mentality of thinking in tenths of an hour, right? And I've got a tenth of an hour to get this done, or 6/10 of an hour, and so I'm constantly thinking of this, right? So there's another innovation that I think needs to come to the marketplace, and I think AI is going to help get us there. Is get away from the billable hour model. And I think that would make lawyers happier. I think it would definitely make clients happier because they don't want to feel nickeled and dimed. And AI will allow us to get more accurate on pricing the cost of a job, right? And so at some point, we're just going to be pricing projects, and AI is going to help us control the cost so we can preserve or maybe even expand our margin,
I just know that when I call you and I have a timer set on my computer at 5 minutes and 54 seconds. And if I'm getting close, I just hang up. Because I can't pay for that 7th minute.
Yeah, well, no, exactly. And that's the point. Nobody wants to talk to the damn attorney. And that's kind of sad, isn't it? I mean,
I think that is the biggest hurdle. Yeah. Man, I know I need to, and then you're catching up and you're trying to build rapport, and it's like, who's paying for this? Am I paying for this? Yeah. I mean, it just, there's a lot of.
Well, we've moved, I'd say at least 60% of our business is fixed fee. And so, we'll have an upfront conversation. We'll talk about the parameters of sort of the job, and we'll quote a fixed fee, a flat fee. And look, if we start to go sideways because there's some information that you forgot to tell us is pretty darn important, or you become a needier client than we ever expected it to be, we might have to have a conversation about the fee. But we've moved mainly to a fixed fee model, and we're going to continue to move that way. I think for us, it's going to be a good recruiting tool. Lawyers hate living their lives, by the billable hour, especially the new generation, right? So I think the old guard, that's all they've known. It's worked for them. They kind of look at the younger attorneys and kind of, look at them as weaklings or whatever it may be. But there's a shift happening for sure.
Maybe I'm just laughing. Like maybe it's a way to size people up. Hey, my hourly rate is this versus junior lawyer here kind of thing. But
it is certainly an ego-driven industry. And the funny thing is that's focusing on revenue, which really doesn't matter if you're a business owner. It's the profit, right? Fine, we can make $100 million, but if our expenses are 99 million, why do I care, right? Like I'd rather focus on the profits. How do we get it to be more profitable?
Yeah. You said
I do agree that the emotional aspect is going to be the last card to turn over, especially when it comes to what you're doing with elder law or what have you. I mean, that is just, I mean, you need to sit down with someone and they really need to understand, this is what this means and this is what that means. So 100% agree with you that from the emotional side, that is super key.
Yeah. I mean, people are living longer. They're living with impairments and dementia, but that doesn't mean that they can't sign a document, that they can't know what they're doing in a certain document, right? And so that's why we're leaning into elder law, because the population is aging and it's a big population. It's living longer. It needs a special set of counselors to deal with that and navigate those issues.
Okay, so talked 41 minutes. We haven't really talked about what Hooklaw is, just on the surface. We're in an elevator in downtown Norfolk. Let's call it 5 floors. Give me your 30-second elevator pitch on what is Hooklaw.
Hooklaw is it's obviously a law firm that focuses on wealth transfer, tax planning, trust and estates administration, and elder law. And we're trying to be a multidisciplinary type of firm that offers kind of a centralized hub for our clients and a solutions provider to our clients. That's more or less what it is now.
I didn't run the clock because I was worried I was going to get charged for it.
No, you're not on the clock. Now, if we go over the hour and 15 minutes, I'll have to think about it.
What's one of the things that most people miss when it comes to estate planning or passing things on to their loved ones?
Quite honestly, they don't want to deal with it. They don't want to think about it. They don't want to do it, and they leave it for whoever's left behind to clean up the mess. And typically, it's those who are left behind to clean up the mess realize, I don't want to do this to the next person. And oftentimes, people feel like they don't have enough to do an estate plan, and that's not right. And so we need to do a better job of educating our clients and the market that estate planning is really for everyone. I mean, if you've got an 18-year-old, you should probably have a power of attorney for them, an advanced medical directive, because they're out and about. They could get in a car accident or some sort of, God forbid, mental impairment.
Right.
And somebody needs to step into their shoes and manage their affairs. Right.
Yeah. That was something that we totally didn't think about when we sent our daughter to JMU, and our son's at Tech, and it was like, we didn't think about having a power of attorney in place if they're at school and something happens to them. Yeah. Like that was, I don't even know how we even were tipped onto that. It might even been like a Facebook thing, like, hey, did you get your power of attorney kind of thing? I was like, yeah, I didn't even.
Oh, so if something doesn't matter with them, then you can actually make the
18.
decisions for them because they're 18. I got it.
Yeah.
They got their own bank accounts or a car or whatever, right? You got to step into their shoes. So, I mean, people just don't think that, and nobody likes to deal with the worst case scenario, right? This is what we're thinking about, is the worst case scenario.
But is what we're talking about like what Britney Spears' dad was doing?
Yeah, I mean, look, there are definitely people who send money off to Thailand or whatever because this person called them and they've now decided that that's their friend and they're going to start shipping, and that's perfectly okay if you've got all your faculties and that's what you really want to do. But if there's a determination made that you've actually kind of lost your mind or your ability to manage these things, then you'll somebody can come to us and we'll help them get a guardianship and a conservatorship and kind of help take control of that situation so that they don't waste away their savings in their life,
I did that intentionally. So we use this tool afterwards called Podcast AI, and it ranks like these snippets so that we can take it and make it into like shorts and reels and all these little videos. I was interested to see if like me saying Britney Spears was going to be the thing, but put them over the top. That's how I was thinking. That's why I asked it.
Well, I was just thinking to myself, I'm like, man, this is our 250th show, and I don't know if we've ever talked about Britney Spears. So
I don't know. I read her book. It was quite interesting. She was getting drunk with her mom like at 12 at a bar, drinking like white Russians.
Yeah, like the dude abides. The Big Lebowski, that's what he would drink.
I've only seen half that movie. Please don't shoot me.
That's a cult classic.
I know. Okay. Jeez.
I don't even know where to go now, Zach.
Okay, so you guys like I know a lot of law firms have recruiting issues where there's not enough pool of lawyers to pull from. Are you guys seeing any of that stuff in this region?
Well, absolutely. I think the challenges are, Hampton Roads as a market is not, I'll say, the sexiest market to recruit to, right? Like people don't want to move to Hampton Roads necessarily when the other options are Charlotte, DC, New York, Miami, whatever you may say. So that's a challenge in itself. So I think we got to do better at figuring out how can we elevate this market. But in my world, the trust and estates and elder law world, I got to tell you, when I was in law school, I got one class on it, and it was not very exciting. But I think our practice is pretty darn exciting because we get into a lot of family issues and family businesses and people who've built these big amazing businesses, but haven't really planned on how they're going to transfer that stuff to the next generation. And is it going to the next generation, or is it going to a charity for your cat or whatever, right? There's so many ways we can go. And I think law schools don't do a good job of, exposing lawyers to the trust and estates field. It's just one class generally that's required. It's just, it's unfortunate.
What school actually does prepare someone for that actual career? I have a journalism degree. I loved my time at West Virginia, but I learned more on that first week on the job of learning the actual skills of being in there than I did being there. And I loved my professors. I really do. Like great people. But like, I feel like college doesn't prepare us for the actual like work that you're going to do in most cases.
You're right. I agree with you there. I mean, I think college kind of helps you learn how to learn. But does it get you there now?
This is a super silly question, but is there concentration areas when you go to law school that you want to concentrate in this particular portion?
Yeah. I mean, basically you get to pick your curriculum, and if you want to, do more litigation or criminal work, you can take more classes in that. There certainly is a base requirement of certain classes that the law school require, and that's usually based on what the bar is going to test you on, and just the basics classes. But you can, if you want to get more into real estate, you'll just take as many real estate classes and tax classes and things like that. So you can kind of specialize.
Yeah, I mean, it's just the reason it popped in my head was like, you had mentioned there was one class on it, and then when I went to business school, we took one entrepreneurship class, and that was basically just talked about this is a cap table, and this is what dilution is, and that was about it. And I was just like,
I will say in law school they do a good job of encouraging like first year students in the summer between first and second year to go out and get an internship somewhere, right? And that's kind of your path to get to a firm. So it's a great way to get exposure to practical experience, but it's not required. And a lot of firms are not built to receive these interns and really give them a rich experience, right? There are, where I went, Penn State, they definitely had some clinics that got you some real world exposure. So that was good and helpful. But I tell you, most attorneys, and this is the problem, right? This is what I'm working on within our firm, and I can see it at every firm, is getting the attorneys to understand the business of law. What does it mean to have this client and process their file this way? What does that mean from a business standpoint? Yeah, you've helped them out like a doctor. You want to treat the patient, but at the end of the day, we are a business, and we got to evaluate what's a good patient, what's not a good patient for us. What's a economical way to manage this file, all those things, right? Business development. I mean, they don't teach you any of that in law school. And Zach, you mentioned it, attorneys get a lot of business from other attorneys, but they don't hang out. I mean, it's mind boggling.
Yeah. It's, my school was not required to do internships either. I'm not saying I would have wished they would have done that, but I do think that maybe I would have thought differently of that career had I actually stepped inside of a newsroom beforehand. Just what you see on TV is not what you see. The other, what do they say? It's like how the sausage is made.
Yeah,
thing. Like it's very different.
Well,
and
I see that now with Madison and all of her friends starting to graduate. Yeah, and they're not able to find a job. Here they are. They go to college with this promise, essentially a promise. Go 4 years, go in debt, however much money you're going to go in debt, then you're going to graduate, you're going to get this job. And then now they're finding, man, I'm not able to find this job. So rather than really grind out and try to find the job and get some experience, and that's the thing that they're lacking, they're just going to go right into grad school, go further in debt and prolong the issue another 2 years. And they still they're not going to have any experience in 2 years. I mean, it's just, I don't know how this is going to play out, but it's interesting. It's really, really interesting.
No, it is. I mean, I probably wouldn't be in this position if I didn't have a networking contact in Andy Hook, and I hadn't maintained a relationship with him, going to coffee and lunch every other month. We wouldn't have had this happenstance conversation that led to me now being the CEO and a partner of the firm, 3 years in. And so I think, when I left the family business, I went out on my own and I started working from home in 2015, which was really odd. And I got into this, routine of, not taking a shower and just getting to the computer and not getting dressed. And I was like, man, this sucks. I got to change this up. So I built a routine, and I said, all right, I need to get out of the house and go to lunch. I'm going to find somebody and go to lunch with them. And I'd say that paid dividends and continues to pay dividends today. Getting out and just chatting with people and forging those relationships opens up so many doors.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have gotten this opportunity had I not done that.
You never invited me to lunch.
You're hard to get to. I would run into you at the bar every now and again, but
I've never seen you at a bar.
I saw you once after, I think, Wine Fest, and that was a messy night.
Oof.
You probably met Tim too.
Oh, really?
I've only been to Wine Fest with him. And
I've only been to it. Yeah, man.
It's been 12, 13 years since I've been, but yeah, it was a long time ago.
Yeah, so it's a wild ride. But yeah. I think what you said is incredibly important, right? I wrote a post, I don't know, 15 years ago, 10 years ago, basically like an entrepreneur's guide to an MBA. And my whole theory behind it was take the $140,000, which is what at the time, how much an MBA was going to cost. Don't go to MBA school and take that money and invest it in relationships where you just pay to go on dinners or experiences with people. And what that would yield you is far more than what you would get by getting that MBA. And I don't know. I mean, it seems pretty smart to me, just like if you're going to spend 140, but then you're nowhere, why not learn all of that stuff, the business development, how to ask someone, how to get rejected, how do you start a conversation? Tell me about some of the things in your business, whatever. I don't know. It just seems like it's a pretty strong strategic move for someone to do that rather than throw all that cash towards
an institution. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of what I see these days is there's a lot of smart people out there, even in the legal field or in the capital markets world or private equity world, The problem is they can't talk to people. And so if I've got a client who's never dealt with this and I'm trying to explain their solution, and it's so complicated that their eyes get crossed and that they just tune me out, I'm not going to close that client, right?
Yeah.
Like, so you've got to be able to have the skills to translate and read the body language to know that this client is not getting what I'm saying. So I need to slow it down. I need to simplify. And so that's a skill, taking a very complex kind of topic and distilling it down to something that, the other side's not, it's not that they're not intelligent. They're just not used to hearing what you're talking about.
Wow.
And so
the scary thing is it's getting worse. I mean, people are not talking to each other anymore.
Yeah.
From the devices that are scrolled upon for hours on end. And we don't get political on this show, but boy, it's just if you're not on my side, then I'm not talking to you. It's like, man, you just that's a slippery slope within itself too.
Yeah, totally agree. I mean, I was talking to the head of a prominent private school around here, and he was talking about that too. And the kids don't even engage anymore, right? And so what he's trying to do is push them to engage and let it be known it's okay to disagree, but let's base our discussions on fact. Let's be able to engage in a discussion and disagree, because if we can't do that, it's basically two sides, right? And we're not making progress. So.
Yep. What's something you want to talk about that we haven't talked about?
Oh man. I'm just really excited as to what's happening in the professional services industry and especially the legal field. I think that there is a revolution coming, and I'm trying to get ahead of it. Much like the doctor's offices of yesteryear, where you kind of had a mom and pop operation with doctors, but they slowly got rolled up and modernized, and I think the same things happened in the dentist field and the accounting field, and I see it now happening, or could happen, in the legal field. And so I'm just excited to be kind of at the edge of that and see where this goes, because I think law firms have tremendous opportunity to innovate internally, just business processes, business processes, and then you throw in AI. It's going to go a long way. So it's an exciting time.
All right. Well, we close every show with Zach and I have been on this hunt trying to figure out what is the food that represents Hampton Roads. You got Chicago deep dish, buffalo wings. Is there a defining food of the region? And if not, where is your go-to place that you would like to take somebody out for dinner or a meal? Doesn't have to be dinner.
Yeah. No, I don't think there's a food that defines Hampton Roads. Not that I've come across it yet, and I've been here my entire life. We like to go to Mizuno's. I don't know if you guys have been there. Mizuno's sushi is a top choice for us in the Hilltop area.
Closest thing we've come to is we are claiming the Orange Crush. There's debate on who owns that, us or I don't even. No other place does, so we don't even need to talk about it. But we're claiming the Orange Crush.
Okay, that's an interesting one. Yeah, I didn't think about that. Yeah.
And then I guess the second place or the other co-winner, but it's really not a food. It's the white sauce that you get at the Mexican restaurants around here.
But they got that up in Pennsylvania too. I feel like I've been.
Oh, really?
In other places. Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
That's where we're at.
But I think that's the great thing about Hampton Roads, right? Like you go to a sports bar and you got people wearing jerseys from every state, and
True.
That's kind of the nature of Hampton Roads.
I think some people make that argument, right? We had Namarama on, who was like a foodie, and he said the answer is that it is so diverse that you can get anything. So, I mean, I appreciate that. But I do think that like food does move the needle with like the recruitment of what you were talking about too earlier with other cities,
Mhm.
and having something like that. I mean, I guess an Orange Crush could be the needle mover, for getting out of college person or you know soon to be getting into their careers. That could be a good thing if you're into that slice of the world. So I don't know, it's pretty cool.
I don't
Angel,
know.
it's been
No, I thought that one of the greatest things I was at an event at the Cavalier Hotel, and one of the coolest things they had was they had a crush bar, and I was like, man, we need more of this in our lives. You could get Orange
Can't
Crush.
argue with that.
Oh
Yeah.
man, we need to make it happen.
Let's start a movement.
The crush bar. I like that. Tejal, it's been absolutely great catching back up. Continued
Likewise.
success at Hooklaw. Just check them out at hooklaw.net. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, guys. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Tejal.
Hope to connect again soon.
Awesome. Thanks so much.